Okay, so we finished chapters 3, and we're already down 3 and 4, and we're already down to chapter 5. We've been talking about foolishness, this concept of foolishness, the idea of something that is below logic. And below logic is example of below logic is as they would say in the Hebrew, when I was at the age of stupid teen, you might want to. I think all of us have had experiences that you might describe as being foolish, because of course the frontal cortex is not fully developed, and we do dumb things. So the examples that I typically describe is, as a teenager, there was I was driving like a little minibus for a high school. I was 20, and this is in Buffalo, New York. There was a rainstorm, and I remember seeing this bus go into a bus stop, and there was this tidal wave of water that just shot out and just completely drenched the bus stop. So the next day, when I was driving my little minibus with kids in the back, I was like, "Oh, let's do this ourselves." So I, slammed down the gas and start heading into that bus stop. And as I'm going there and trying to cut left into traffic, the last second, I realized that actually it's a merge zone, and I don't have very much room. And it was just suddenly the light bulb went on. I thought, this is really a stupid thing to do with a van full of kids for a splash. Thank God somebody saw I was being really stupid and let me in, so Baruch Hashem, nothing happened. But of course, that is something that is below logic. If I would have been thinking things through, then I would realize, well, this is a dumb idea. There's nothing that's going to be accomplished as a result of this, so there's no point in it. And that's what we've described until now as stuff that's below logic. In others, when we recognize who we are, what our purpose is in this world, we have a broader vision of our life, and we recognize our connection with God and our need to have that connection, that constant connection. So therefore, we make the right decisions. And we make the wrong decisions typically as a result of foolishness, when we think that, all right, we're running our own system, we're doing whatever we want. In this section of the Maimer, the Rebbe completely changes it and says that there's also something that's above logic, something that's beyond logic. There's a transcendent form of behavior that seems to be, one might describe it as foolish. But it's actually a very, very high level of godliness. And that's a critical element of the spiritual journey. It's not one that everybody is capable of reaching, as we'll see. But part of our job is going to be to change over, as he's going to describe it, the foolishness within the world to the foolishness of holiness. Shtut dilumatze, shtut, foolishness that is negative, into a positive type of foolishness, something that is beyond logic. And that's what we're going to describe. So chapter 5. So the Rebbe continues and says, as we have seen, man has a potential for deviating from the middle path lower than logic. Similarly, he has the potential for a deviation above reason and understanding, and by means of this deviation, he can approach self-transcendence. This level of conduct is called the folly of holiness. So now we're going to tell a few stories. The Talmud relates that Yehuda bar Eloi would twirl a sprig of myrtle as he danced before the bride. So this is all coming from a Gemara that's talking about the mitzvah of dancing in front of the chassan and kala, in front of the bride and groom, which we, of course, covered some element of that in the Maimer of Licha Daidi, in terms of the power of what happens when a bride and groom. And here we touch on it as well, briefly. But he would dance in front of the bride with this myrtle twig. Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchok would juggle 3 myrtle twigs while he danced before the brides. So he said, here's this great scholar, and he's juggling myrtle twigs. So Rabbi Zera said about him, this venerable sage is embarrassing us by making light of the respect due to Torah scholars through his undignified behavior. Kamachsif lon saba, you're embarrassing us. Rabbi Zera was not even his child. And he was saying, Rabbi, you're embarrassing all the rest of us. And, because rabbis are supposed to act in a certain way. You're supposed to behave in a certain way. Here he's sitting in front of the bride and he's juggling myrtle twigs. This is clown stuff. You're clowning around. But when Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak passed away, the Gemara continues and says a pillar of fire appeared in front of his coffin, separating him from all those who were near him. And this pillar of fire, the Gemara says, was in the shape of a myrtle twig. So Zera was at the funeral, and he retracted his previous remark, and he said one of 3 things. There are 3 different girsayos, 3 different opinions as to what exactly he said. The first opinion is that he said the venerable sage has been well served by his sprig, by his shoita'eh. Shoita'eh means his twig, his myrtle twig. In other words, he was able to accomplish something. Obviously, if at his funeral there's a pillar of fire that's in the shape of a myrtle twig, obviously he's been well served by it. The second opinion was that he didn't say shoita'eh, but shtusei. He has been well served by his foolishness. And the third opinion was that the venerable sage has been well served by his shitase, by his policy. So we don't know exactly whether he said all 3, whether he inferred all 3, or whether people misheard how he said it, or whether it got mistranslated over the next few months, years, or whatever it was. But in any case, all 3 of these are related in terms of the story. But there's no question that what he was doing was he was clowning around. And on a basic level, it seems to be a foolishness. The serious academic scholar turns into a clown at every wedding. The Rebbe continues and says that this is not just clowning around. Foolishness of this kind transcends understanding and thus represents a wondrously superior mode of conduct. Indeed, in the wake of the dancing of Rabbi Shmuel bar Yitzchak, he was granted a sublime revelation of divine favor, which is this pillar of fire, a true revelation of divine light. And the reason why is, in other words, why was this such a special thing, is because the wedding is not just a regular occurrence. If he was clowning around on a regular day, and then, that's certainly not something that is part of the equation, but he specifically did it as part of a divine service of dancing in front of for the bride and groom. Why? Because, as we quoted in the Maimer Lecha Daidi, Talmud says that ish v'isha zachu shchina shruya b'neihem, if a man and a woman are found worthy, then the words ish and isha have the letters, they have the common letters of Aleph Shin, Eish, fire, and the middle letters, Yud and the Hey, the Yud in the last letter actually, spell God's name. And so therefore the Talmud says that if they are worthy, they can have the Shekhinah dwell among them. And as he says here, for Isha is composed of Eish, fire, and the letter Yud. Isha is composed of Eish and the letter Hey. When a man and woman are found worthy, the letters Yud and Hey combined to spell the name of God, the Shekhinah dwells in their midst. And moreover, the Rebbe adds, the divine presence then becomes manifest in the kind of marriage that is called binyan adayad, an everlasting edifice. And so because a marriage thus elicits such prodigious spiritual power, the joy of the sages at weddings would burst the conventional bounds of propriety. So their recognition of the power of the particular moment and their service of God inside that particular moment was completely beyond. And we need to point out that this is something that we see even in Tanakh. When the ark was being brought back to Jerusalem, David HaMelech is dancing. And he's dancing with absolute joy. And his wife is Michal. And you got to remember
I don't think it was.
Michal is a princess.
I don't think it was Yerushalayim yet. I think you're still dealing with Neiv and Givon with the Mishkan.
Yes, I apologize. It was after. If it was after, what do you call it? It was after. Come on. It was after when he was bringing the Aron to. It was definitely after Neiv and Givon.
He was bringing.
I have to look it up.
He was bringing it to Shalim. Michal, I think, was in the palace looking out.
He was bringing it to Yerushalayim. Whatever the case is, that detail is not important for this particular point. But the point is that Michal was a princess, and as a princess, she was very disturbed by the fact that the king is dancing. She writes, she says, like the simple folk. And David responds to her very sharply. And obviously their relationship was significantly hurt by that on several levels. But the reason why Michal was looking at that way is that she looked at the view of a monarch as, of course, dignified. You're supposed to behave in a certain manner, and you should not behave in a manner that you're completely letting go in such a way. Let other people do that. And David HaMelech was saying, no, this has nothing to do with me. I'm doing this for the glory of God. And so in terms of that, there's no me, there's no kingship, there's no people, there's no Rekanim, there's no others. I am dancing for God. There's nothing else that exists. So Michal, of course, could not understand that because from a logical perspective, there's a particular way of behavior. You're a king, you behave in a particular way. But David realized, and David's service of God was beyond just a logical, systematic way of serving God. He was completely and absolutely consumed with serving God. And so therefore, logic itself is a limiting factor. It's critical. The vast majority of things we have to do need to be within a systematic form of doing things. Judaism is unbelievably systematic. But it's not only systematic, it's meant to be transformational as well. And for that, there has to be moments of transcendence. And David HaMelech was expressing that transcendence through his dancing. And likewise, of course, Shmuel bar Abba. And so the Rebbe explains this. He says the explanation for this pattern of behavior that transcends reasons lies in the teaching no thought can grasp Hashem at all. For God transcends the very category of understanding. Les machshava tfisa bei klal. No thought can grasp God at all. As much as we try to understand godliness, you're only understanding aspects of his relationship or aspects of how God reveals himself in certain areas, but I can't grasp God himself. The Tanya expresses this concept as follows. In relation to the Almighty, who is beyond intelligence and knowledge, and who can in no way be comprehended by any thought, all men are like fools before him. As the Pasuk says, as it's written, Vanivar I am foolish and ignorant. I am as a beast before you, and vani tamid imach, I am constantly with you. Meaning that because I approach you as a fool and a beast, in other words, through the irrational power of faith, through transcendence, precisely therefore and thereby, I am constantly with you. In order to relate to God's essence, one must take a self-effacing commitment that transcends the bounds of reason. Hence, this level of spiritual attainment is also called foolishness. It's a great story of a well-known chassid, two well-known chassidim actually, and I apologize if I told this story before. One was Rabbi Moshe Gerari, who is known as a tremendous intellect. And the other one was Rabbi Moshe Yitzchaki, who was known as a very sharp person. And more of what we call an oived, somebody who serves God through prayer, through that. Also very intelligent, but his focus was less on the academic, so to speak, side of Judaism. Sitting grounded at a Farbrengen, and Rabbi Moshe Yitzchaki starts needling Rabbi Moshe Gerari. Oh, you're such a brilliant guy. You know so much. Hasidus, Kabbalah, Talmud. Explain to us, what is God? So Rabbi Moshe Gerari says, you can't explain God. He says, look, you're such a brilliant guy. You understand there's got to be some way for you to be able to bring some element of understanding the essence of God to us so that we can perceive it. And he keeps pushing him one way or the other over the Farbrengen. And finally, at some point, Rabbi Moshe Gerari kind of looks back and says, well, Atzmus is, the essence of God is, and Rabbi Moshe Yitzchaki gives him a slap across the face and says, you cannot describe God. So it was a setup. And he was pointing out that basically as an academic, as a brilliant person, you can get stuck. And at some point you can convince yourself that you have some kind of understanding. But as much as you understand, we don't understand. And to paraphrase one of the greatest philosophers, of course, I think it was Plato, who said that the ultimate of knowledge is not knowing. So the rabbis paraphrased that and said, the ultimate of knowing is that we cannot know God. But there's knowing from a lack of knowledge. And then there's knowing from a greater understanding, from studying so much and growing so much that your faith is lifted up to a much, much, much higher level, to a level that's beyond. And that's the reason why the Talmud says that Moshe is the greatest believer. And the question is, how could he be a believer in God when he spoke to God face to face? And the answer is that his intelligence and his search to understand to God lifted up his faith to a much higher level. David HaMelech was similar to that as well. And in David HaMelech, we see his reaction to his love for God express itself in this element of dancing in such a way that's completely beyond logic. The Rebbe continues and says, similarly, we find a prophet is referred to as Meshuggah. And this is going back to the story with Shaul as well. Shaul at some point joins the prophets, and suddenly he himself becomes prophesizing as well. And he's described as, people say that he's gone crazy. He completely takes off his clothes and he's prophesizing with everybody else. What's going on? Why is he taking his clothes off? And why is he called crazy? It's important to point out that the prophet, as described, the whole process of prophecy is an intellectual endeavor. The Rambam describes the whole process to be able to gain prophecy. It's specifically through somebody who does a tremendous amount of work, on themselves personally, both in terms of understanding Torah, as well as trying to get total and absolute control of their emotions and to be able to be extremely calibrated in every single way possible. But when a person gets prophecy, they're described as being Meshuggah. They're described as being crazy. Why? For during the revelation of prophecy, a person has to divest themselves of materiality. He has to step beyond his understanding and emotions and to attain a level of self-nullification beyond all limits of reason. For this reason, too, the prophets would remove their clothing during prophetic revelation. Thus we find that Shaul also removed his clothes in prophecy. Why the removal of clothes? The Rebbe continues and says, and again, this is something that we touched on the Maimer Lgani, which I find very, very powerful because of the fact that, again, this is the final Maimer that the previous Rebbe delivered. And of course, Lgani is the first Maimer or not the first, but basically it's a critical Maimer in terms of bringing the Rebbe into his family. So that itself was fascinating. And so there seems to be some kind of, correlation here, so to speak. But he says that the need for clothes first came about as a result of the sin of the Eitz Hadat, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Before the sin, Adam and his wife were naked and they were not ashamed. And after the sin, man's feelings, hitherto instinctively good, comprise both good and evil. Indeed, this is the core of their sin, as implied in the later verse. They knew that they were naked. At this point, they first felt the need for clothes. What's going on? So the next paragraph explains what this is. The ultimate source for the experience of feelings comprising of both good and evil is one's awareness of his own intellectual and emotions. Prophecy thus demands divesting oneself of one's clothes, in other words, divesting oneself of this awareness of one's own intellect and emotions, and nullifying one's own faculties and sensibilities. The Rambam, that we quoted before, writes that it is one of the fundamental tenets of faith to know that God grants prophecy to men. Prophecy will only rest on a man who is wise and courageous, who overcomes his desires, who desires never and overcome it in any manner. Such conduct, which entails a deviation that transcends the accepted norms of reason and understanding, is called folly, foolishness. So the physical idea of taking one's clothes off is connected with the fact that this person has completely lost a sense of self in God's message. They have totally nullified themselves to the point of total and absolute non-existence. So it's not a matter of modest or not modest, because there's no feelings here. There's no, in fact, the prophet is going back to the experience of prior to the sin of the tree. But this is beyond logic. It doesn't make sense. But like we said before, there's something that doesn't make sense, that is stupid, it's dumb, it's devoid of logic. And there are other things that transcend logic, because this is something that is not systematic. And just a very, very practical way of looking at this, the point is that in a relationship, of course.
Rabbi, I wanted to ask how does that go back to the sin of the tree? Sin of, you said so prophecy goes back. You said prophecy goes back to Adam?
Yeah, so exactly. So what happens is, the sin of the tree of knowledge was basically, she saw that the fruit is good to eat, and so therefore she had a desire for it. Prior to that point, there was no desire for anything else. There was an experience of just instinctive goodness, and there's no drive to anything negative. This is the first problem, is that she has a drive towards something else.
But that's
I
not
want
evidence
that.
of prophecy.
There's a me and there's a that, and I.
That's not.
No, it's not. But
Okay,
prior
so
to that,
prophecy started after that sometime.
godliness. Oh no, they were prophetic in terms of their ability to be able to connect to God. The experience of prophecy is one in which a person gets the message of God, and of course, God speaks to them and says, why have you eaten from the tree and all that. That's a prophetic experience.
When he told him not to eat,
But the difference
maybe that was prophecy. But he ate anyhow.
Absolutely. Right. Gotta remember, prophecy is the experience of receiving a message from God in a way that the entirety of the person is invested in this message. And that is without question, that was true of Adam and Chava before the sin. And they also received it even afterwards. They were given specific instructions immediately afterwards. But when we're talking about you go back to that state in which there is no good, there is no evil, there is only godliness. Does that make more sense?
Rabbi Esther?
Go ahead.
Isn't the fact that that Adam Rishon, the fact that he was able to name the animals a prophetic act? Because how would he know what a name is for a particular animal unless God gave him that capability of doing so? So therefore, if you can say that if he, it's not stam that he gave a name, because that name actually gave an expression of what that animal was. So therefore, there had to be some kind of a prophecy there. But
that makes sense.
The thing that I was looking is why remove your clothes? Well, I think the fact of the matter is that when we put clothes on, it's like we're hiding something. We're hiding ourselves from the rest of people, mankind, whatever you want to say. I think that was something that happened because of what occurred with eating the apple. We sort of hid ourselves from God in what he knew us as the normal sense. So here, when you remove your clothes, you're basically...
Well said. I just do need to point out.
Go ahead, Rabbi. You're breaking up on us.
Sorry, I apologize. It wasn't an apple. But everything that you said,
whatever it was, whatever it was,
that one detail,
a fig, whatever, you pick whatever it is. Okay, so the fact of the matter was that in order for us to expose ourselves, what we are, okay, in so that there is nothing between us and God, we remove that clothing, which is a barrier that keeps us or some part of us hidden from everyone else, not from God.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Well said. Let's see. So where are we up to right now? It's already 10:30.
Bottom of the page.
So we are going to have to finish next week. Excuse me, not next week. On Friday, God willing. On Friday, I'm going to be in Cincinnati, so it's going to be a little bit tight, but God willing, we'll be able to pull it off. But then we're going to pull the whole thing together to be able to understand how this applies to us, where we're going with this. So, Yasher koach for the conversation too, and my apologies again for the
Rabbi,
cough.
Rabbi,
Thank you, Rabbi.
when you said that did Michal use the actual words Lekanim?
I have to look it up. But I believe she used the term kachadari cutting.
Which means the empty ones. There's nothing in them. And
Like a
I'm
bomb.
pretty sure that David would never say such things about people.
That's absolutely correct. But there's no question that she was trying to defend the monarchy and make sure that he behaved as many of our wives would do. I think that's part of the that's part of what our wives sometimes remind ourselves to get back in line. But she was losing sight of course the spiritual process of the whole thing, and she was forgetting that of course David HaMelech was not the average
king.
The average. All right.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
All right. Absolutely. Thank you guys. Have a wonderful day, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rebbe.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi Yestrin.
By the way, I'm sorry, I just looked it up in Shmuel. It was Ir David. It wasn't Yerushalayim, whatever.
Your David is in Yerushalayim.
It's at the bottom. I know where it is. I'm sorry, but the name Yerushalayim wasn't mentioned. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.